Commander Robert had been alone in the vastness of space for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than himself. His ship, the Pathfinder, had been damaged beyond repair during a terrible solar flare 3 months ago. The explosion had torn through the outer hull like paper, destroying the communication systems and killing half of his crew in seconds. He was the only survivor, and he had been drifting ever since, watching the stars move slowly across his viewport while his oxygen supply decreased with each passing day. The crash came suddenly without warning. Robert was sleeping in the captain's chair when the ship's sensors detected the moon. There was no time to prepare, no time to make calculations or to slow down properly. The Pathfinder hit the frozen surface of the moon at tremendous speed, bouncing once, twice, then finally coming to rest against a jagged ridge of ice and rock. Robert woke to the sound of metal screaming, alarms blaring all around him, and the terrible sensation of falling. When everything went quiet, he lay on the floor of the bridge, his body aching, blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. It took him several minutes to pull himself to his feet. The emergency lights were flickering, casting strange shadows across the control panels. Most of the systems were dead. The main power core had failed during the impact. Only the backup systems were still running and they would not last long. Robert checked his suit and found it was still intact, which meant he could survive outside the ship at least for a while. He activated the airlock and stepped out onto the surface of the moon. The cold was unlike anything Robert had ever experienced. Even through his suit's insulation he could feel the temperature trying to pull the life out of his body. The landscape before him was nothing but white and gray, an endless expanse of ice and frozen rock stretching out to the horizon. His breath came in short, quick gasps as he looked around trying to get his bearings. This moon was supposed to be empty, a barren, lifeless place marked on no star charts except as a warning to avoid it. But something was wrong. Something did not feel right. Robert's suit had basic scanning equipment built into the wrist panel. He activated it and watched as the device began to measure the temperature, the atmospheric composition, and the electromagnetic readings in the area. That was when he saw it. There was a heat signature. Impossible. Nothing should be warm on this moon. Everything should be frozen solid, dead and gone. But according to his scanner, somewhere beneath the ice, something was generating significant heat. Something was alive or at least powered by some kind of energy source. Robert made a decision that would change everything. He started walking toward the source of the heat, following the direction his scanner indicated. The ice beneath his feet crunched with each step. Sometimes he would break through the outer layer and sink up to his knee in softer snow underneath. But he kept moving forward, driven by a combination of curiosity and desperation. If there was something alive down there, something that generated heat, maybe it meant shelter. Maybe it meant survival. After walking for what felt like hours, his legs burning with exhaustion, Robert found the crevasse. It was a narrow opening in the ice, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. The heat signature was stronger here, pulsing from somewhere deep below. He checked his oxygen levels and saw that he had enough to explore for another hour before he would need to return to the ship. He took a breath, said a silent prayer to whatever gods might be listening, and began to descend into the darkness. As Robert climbed deeper, the walls of the crevasse began to change. At first they were jagged and natural, shaped by thousands of years of ice and wind. But gradually they became smoother. The ice gave way to something harder, darker. Metal. And then he saw it, carved into the wall in letters that were unmistakably artificial, unmistakably designed. Symbols. Language. Architecture. This was not a natural formation at all. This was something that had been built, constructed by intelligent beings with purpose and planning. His heart began to race. Robert had been alone for so long that he had started to wonder if he was the last human left alive in the universe. The thought of finding evidence of other intelligent life, of finding technology and design, was almost too much to comprehend. He continued downward, moving more carefully now, aware that he was entering something unknown and potentially dangerous. The entrance appeared before him like a mouth opening in the earth. It was massive, easily 50 meters tall, and it was framed by a dark material that reflected his helmet light like still water. Above the entrance, more symbols were etched into the surface, arranged in patterns that suggested meaning and importance. Robert stood at the threshold, his suit's lights illuminating the darkness within, and took a moment to absorb what he was seeing. Then he stepped inside. The moment Robert crossed the threshold, lights began to activate all around him. They flickered to life in sequence, running down the length of a long corridor that seemed to stretch deeper into the moon than should have been physically possible. The walls were smooth metal, polished to a mirror shine, and they hummed with a low-frequency energy that Robert could feel in his bones. The corridor was pristine, untouched by time or decay. Everything was preserved perfectly, as though it had been waiting for someone to come and find it, waiting for him. Robert moved forward slowly, his eyes taking in every detail, his mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. This facility was nothing like anything humanity had ever constructed. The technology, the design, the precision of every detail suggested a civilization far more advanced than anything he had ever encountered. As he walked deeper into the complex, past chambers filled with strange equipment and storage units sealed behind transparent barriers, he began to understand that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. Something that would change the course of human history forever. He did not know it yet, but Robert was not alone on this moon. And he was not the first to find this place. Commander Robert walked deeper into the facility, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridors like the heartbeat of some sleeping giant slowly waking up. The lights continued to activate as he moved forward, responding to his presence as though the building itself was aware of him, watching him, acknowledging his arrival after a very long time. He passed through several chambers filled with strange equipment and storage units sealed behind transparent barriers. Inside those barriers, he could see objects that looked like they belonged to advanced technology, tools and devices that he did not recognize and could not begin to understand. The facility seemed to go on forever, descending deeper and deeper into the moon with each turn he took. Robert's oxygen levels were dropping, but he could not bring himself to turn back. Something was pulling him forward, drawing him deeper into the complex like an invisible rope tied around his chest. His survival instincts screamed at him to be cautious, to turn back while he still had time, but his curiosity was stronger than his fear. He had to know what this place was. He had to know why it was here and who had built it. After what felt like hours of walking, though his suit's clock told him it had only been 40 minutes, Robert finally reached the central chamber. It was enormous, far larger than any of the previous rooms he had passed through. The ceiling stretched up so high that his light could not reach it, disappearing into darkness above him. The walls curved gently, forming a perfect circle, and in the center of that circle sat a single structure. A pod. It was made of the same dark metal as the rest of the facility, but it was different from the other equipment he had seen. This one was clearly designed to hold something, to preserve something precious. Robert approached the pod slowly, cautiously, aware that he might be about to touch something that should not be touched. As he drew closer, his suit sensors began to pick up readings. The pod was active. It was still powered, still functioning after all these years, still doing whatever it had been designed to do. And inside the pod, through a transparent section in the top, Robert could see a figure. A human figure. A woman. She was pale, almost white, as though she had been drained of all color. Her hair was long and silver-streaked, falling across her shoulders like a waterfall of metal and ice. She wore robes that seemed to be made of some kind of shimmering material, adorned with symbols that matched the ones carved throughout the facility. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful, as though she was simply sleeping, dreaming peaceful dreams in the darkness of her pod. Robert stood very still, staring at her, unable to process what he was seeing. "Hello," Robert said quietly, his voice sounding very small in the vast chamber. There was no response. The woman did not move. She did not open her eyes. She simply continued to sleep her long, uninterrupted sleep. Robert reached out toward the pod, his gloved hand trembling slightly. As soon as his fingers touched the cold metal surface, a series of events began to unfold. Lights flickered across the control panel built into the side of the pod. A sound, mechanical and ancient, began to echo through the chamber. It sounded like machinery waking up, gears turning after a very long time, systems coming back to life. A voice, synthesized and smooth, spoke through speakers that Robert could not locate. Stasis sequence terminating, the voice said in perfect English. Primary occupant awakening. Biometric scan in progress. Compatibility confirmed. Consciousness revival commencing. What is happening? Robert asked, backing away from the pod. But the voice did not answer him. Instead, the pod began to glow with a soft blue light. The transparent section at the top began to fog up from the inside, as though something warm was stirring within. Robert watched, frozen in place, unable to look away. The woman's eyes opened suddenly, and they were a shocking shade of gold. Not brown, not blue, not any color that Robert had ever seen in a human eye before. Gold, like molten metal, like the sun itself had been captured and placed inside her skull. She gasped, her body convulsing as consciousness returned to it after a sleep that had lasted longer than any human should survive. Her hands pressed against the inside of the pod, her fingers spreading wide, as though she was trying to push through the barrier that separated her from the world. Robert moved forward instinctively, reaching out to help as the pod's top section began to hiss and unlock. He did not know if what he was doing was safe, if it was wise, but his instincts told him that this woman needed help. The pod opened fully, releasing a cloud of white vapor that smelled like strange chemicals and ancient history. The woman began to fall forward, her body weak from the long sleep, and Robert caught her before she hit the ground. She was surprisingly warm despite her pale appearance. Her skin was soft, and her body was real, solid, not a ghost or a hallucination born from his loneliness. She gripped his shoulders with surprising strength, her golden eyes focusing on his face with an intensity that made Robert feel as though he was being examined, studied, read like a book written in a language he did not quite understand. "A human," she said, her voice like wine through distant valleys, like music played on instruments that had not been heard in a very long time. "You came back. You actually came back." Robert tried to speak, but no words came out. He simply stared at her, his mind unable to form thoughts or questions or anything coherent. This woman, this golden-eyed creature in her strange robes, was speaking to him as though she knew him, as though she had been expecting him to arrive. "I am Empress Victoria of the 7th Galactic Accord," she said, still gripping his shoulders, still staring into his eyes with those impossible golden eyes. "And you are?" "The first light in 789 years of darkness." Empress Victoria moved slowly through the corridors of the facility, her body still weak from the long sleep, but her mind sharp and alert. Robert followed behind her, watching as she navigated through the passages with certainty and purpose, as though she had walked these halls 1,000 times before. She led him through a series of chambers, each one more impressive than the last, until they finally arrived at a room that took Robert's breath away. It was vast, circular, and the walls were covered entirely with screens and panels that glowed with soft blue light. In the center of the room stood a large platform, and above it, the air itself seemed to shimmer and twist. "This is the archive chamber," Victoria said, her voice still carrying that strange, musical quality. "This is where I will show you the truth about your people. This is where you will understand why I have been waiting here alone for so very long." Victoria walked to the center of the platform and raised her hands. Immediately, the air above her began to change. Images appeared, three-dimensional and impossibly vivid, showing scenes from a time so distant that Robert could barely comprehend it. He saw vast cities built among the stars, massive structures that floated in the void of space, their surfaces glowing with energy and light. He saw ships traveling between worlds, and on those ships he saw humans. Not the weak, fragile humans of his time, but strong, capable beings moving with purpose and confidence through the corridors of these magnificent vessels. 10,000 years ago, Victoria began, her eyes fixed on the holographic scenes playing out before them, your people achieved something remarkable. You became explorers, builders, warriors, philosophers, and scientists. You reached out into the galaxy and found civilizations like my own. We joined together, humans and the races of the 7th Galactic Accord, and we built something wonderful. We created peace. We shared knowledge. We grew together. The images changed. Robert saw humans working alongside other beings, aliens whose forms were so strange and beautiful that he struggled to accept they could be real. They worked in laboratories, in vast factories, in cities of crystal and light. They studied together, built together, lived together in harmony. It was a vision of utopia, of everything that Robert had always hoped humanity could become. But then, Victoria said, and her voice grew heavy and sad, the plague came. The images on the wall shifted again. Now Robert saw darkness spreading across the galaxy like ink in water. World after world fell silent. Ships stopped responding to communications. Cities went dark. The beautiful, golden age of cooperation and peace began to crumble, torn apart by an invisible enemy that could not be seen, could not be reasoned with, could not be stopped. It was a biological catastrophe, Victoria explained, her golden eyes reflecting the holographic images. It spread from world to world, species to species. Billions died. Civilizations that had stood for millions of years collapsed in weeks. The Accord tried everything to stop it. We tried quarantines. We tried medicine. We tried technology. But nothing worked. Nothing could stop the plague from spreading. Robert watched as the images showed more death, more destruction. He saw fleets of ships being destroyed, their crews already infected, already beyond saving. He saw entire planets being sterilized, their populations wiped out to prevent further spread of the disease. It was horror beyond imagination, a nightmare made real. Your people, Victoria said, turning to look directly at Robert, made a choice. A choice that saved the galaxy. A choice that I have honored by waiting here, alone, for 789 years. The holographic images shifted one final time. Robert saw a conference, a gathering of human leaders in a great hall. He watched as they debated, argued, discussed their options. And then he saw the moment when they made their decision. The images showed human ships gathering together, moving away from the rest of the galaxy, heading out into the empty void. He saw them initiating what looked like a quarantine protocol of massive scale, isolating themselves completely from the rest of the civilization. Humanity sacrificed itself, Victoria said quietly. Your ancestors understood that the plague was spreading through human populations faster than any other species. They understood that the only way to save the galaxy was to remove themselves from it entirely. So they did. They went into isolation. They cut off all contact with the rest of the galaxy. They essentially erased themselves from history to save the rest of us. Robert felt tears forming in his eyes. He thought of his ancestors, of the billions of humans who must have died during that isolation, cut off from the rest of the galaxy, living in darkness and silence to save beings they would never know, civilizations they would never see again. The plague eventually burned itself out, Victoria continued. It ran out of hosts. It evolved into something harmless. The catastrophe ended. But by then humanity had already disappeared. Centuries passed. Then thousands of years. The rest of the galaxy moved on. We built new civilizations. We forgot about you. We forgot about your sacrifice. Most of the Accord does not even know that humans ever existed. Victoria walked toward Robert and placed her hand on his shoulder. But I remembered. I was chosen as the final emissary. I was given this facility stocked with everything humanity would need to rebuild. Genetic archives. Technology. Knowledge. Seeds of agriculture. Everything. And I was told to wait. To wait for humanity to return. To wait for you. How long? Robert asked, his voice barely a whisper. How long did you wait? 789 years, Victoria replied. I have been asleep in that pod for 789 years, holding on to the hope that one day, a human would find this place. That one day I would not be alone anymore. And now you are here, Commander Robert. You are humanity's herald. You are the sign that your people are ready to return to the stars. You are the proof that heroes never truly die. They simply wait for their moment to shine again. Robert stood in silence for a long time after Victoria finished speaking. The weight of what she had told him pressed down on his shoulders like a physical force, making it difficult to breathe, difficult to think, difficult to do anything except stand there and absorb the magnitude of what he had just learned. His entire understanding of humanity's place in the universe had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. He was not simply a stranded astronaut anymore. He was the representative of an entire species, the living symbol of humanity's return to the stars after nearly 1,000 years of silence and isolation. Come, Victoria said gently, taking his arm. There is something else I must show you. She led him through more corridors, climbing higher and higher through the facility until they finally emerged into a chamber that was unlike anything else Robert had seen. It was circular, with transparent aluminum walls that looked out onto the vast expanse of space beyond. Stars stretched out in all directions, countless points of light against the infinite darkness. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, a reminder of just how small humanity was in the face of the universe's immensity. This is the observatory, Victoria said. From here we can see the galaxy as it is now, 789 years after your people disappeared. Much has changed, Robert. The Accord has fractured. New powers have risen. Old alliances have crumbled. The galaxy is not the peaceful place it once was. Robert stepped closer to the transparent wall, staring out at the stars. He thought of Earth, of his home, of all the people he had known and loved before the solar flare had destroyed his ship. Were any of them still alive? Had humanity continued to evolve on Earth, or had they regressed, lost the knowledge and technology of their ancestors? He did not know, and the uncertainty of it all made him feel dizzy. There is a choice before us, Victoria said, her voice cutting through his thoughts like a knife. A choice that will determine the fate of humanity and perhaps the fate of the entire galaxy. We must decide what to do with the knowledge that your people have returned. What do you mean? Robert asked, turning to face her. The facility has communication systems, Victoria explained. Ancient but still functional. We can send out a broadcast to the galaxy, a message that tells the truth about humanity's return. We can announce your presence, reveal that you have survived all these centuries, and declare your intention to rejoin the galactic community. It is the honorable choice, the truthful choice. It is what I would have chosen in another time, another era. But Robert sensed there was more to what she was saying. But the galaxy has changed in ways that you cannot yet understand, Victoria said slowly. There are powers now that would fear humanity's return. There are beings who would see you as a threat, a species that has slept for 1,000 years and might wake up angry and vengeful. There are resources in this facility that could make humanity powerful again, could restore your people to the technological level they achieved 10,000 years ago. But if we announce your presence before we are ready, before we have had time to rebuild and strengthen ourselves, there are those in the galaxy who might move to destroy you before you can become a threat. Robert felt his stomach tighten. What is the alternative? We use this facility to rebuild quietly, Victoria said. We use the genetic archives to grow a new population of humans here on this moon. We advance your technology slowly and carefully, using the knowledge stored in this facility to restore the achievements of your ancestors. We grow stronger in secret, unknown to the rest of the galaxy, until we are powerful enough to protect ourselves. And only then, when we are truly ready, do we announce your return to the universe. How long would that take? Robert asked. Centuries, Victoria replied. Perhaps longer. But by that time humanity would be strong again. Truly strong. Not just a species that has returned, but a civilization that can stand as an equal among the powers of the galaxy. Robert walked back to the transparent wall and pressed his palm against it. He thought about the choice before him. He thought about the safety and security that rebuilding in secret would provide. He thought about the thousands of humans who could be grown from the genetic archives, who could learn and build and create in this facility away from the dangers of the wider galaxy. It was tempting. It was safe. It was logical. But something inside him rebelled against the idea. No, Robert said quietly. No. Victoria's golden eyes widened with surprise. No, Robert repeated, turning to face her with sudden determination in his eyes. We broadcast the message. We tell them the truth. Robert, you do not understand the danger, Victoria began, but Robert held up his hand to stop her. I understand perfectly, he said. I understand that there are risks. I understand that there are beings in the galaxy who might fear us. I understand that announcing our return could bring danger to humanity. But we are human, Victoria. And humanity does not hide. Humanity does not cower in the darkness, waiting for the perfect moment that might never come. Humanity reaches out. Humanity connects. Humanity faces its fears, even when it would be safer not to. Robert stepped closer to Victoria, his voice growing stronger and more passionate with each word. Yes, there's risk. Yes, there are dangers we cannot predict or understand. But that is what being human means. It means taking chances. It means hoping that others will see us for what we truly are, not what they fear we might become. It means believing that truth and honesty and courage can overcome hatred and fear. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her golden eyes studying Robert's face intently. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was a real smile, genuine and warm, and it made her look suddenly young, suddenly alive in a way that sleep could never have accomplished. I waited 789 years for someone to say that, she whispered. I waited 789 years to find someone with the courage to hope again. Welcome back to the stars, Commander Robert. Welcome back to the galaxy. And welcome home to humanity. The broadcast array was located in the highest tower of the facility, a structure that rose from the surface of the moon like a needle pointing toward the heavens. Robert and Victoria climbed toward it through passages that grew narrower and more complex as they ascended, passing through sections of the facility that seemed to have been sealed away for centuries. The air grew colder as they climbed, and Robert could hear the wind howling outside the metal walls, a sound that reminded him of how isolated they were, how far removed from any other living being in the entire universe. When they finally reached the top of the tower, Robert's breath caught in his throat. The chamber before them was enormous, filled with crystalline transmitters and quantum processors that seemed to glow with their own internal light. The walls were covered with screens displaying star charts and communication frequencies, data streams flowing across them like rivers of information. At the center of it all stood a massive control platform, its surface covered with interfaces and controls that Robert could not begin to understand. This is where we will send the message, Victoria said, moving toward the central platform. This array has been waiting for 789 years to transmit again. It has been waiting for someone to give it a voice. Robert followed her to the center of the chamber, watching as she moved her hands across the control surfaces. The interfaces responded to her touch, lights flickering to life, screens activating to display information that only she could comprehend. She worked quickly and efficiently, her movements precise and confident, as though she had done this 1,000 times before. Robert realized that she probably had, back when the Accord was still strong and the galaxy was still at peace, before the plague had torn everything apart. "I will compose the message," Victoria said, not looking up from the controls. "It must be perfect. It must be truthful but hopeful. It must be a declaration, not a plea. Humanity has nothing to apologize for. You must make that clear to the galaxy from the very beginning." Robert stood beside her, watching the screens as she began to type. The words appeared in perfect English, each one carefully chosen, each one carrying weight and meaning. Victoria worked slowly, pausing frequently to reconsider a word or a phrase, making sure that every sentence said exactly what needed to be said. After nearly an hour, she finally stepped back from the controls. "Listen to this," she said. "Tell me if these are the words of humanity." The synthesized voice that came from the speakers was smooth and powerful, neither male nor female, neither old nor young. It was a voice that belonged to no one and everyone at the same time. "Attention, galactic community," the voice began. "This transmission originates from the Kepler sector, Sector 777, coordinates marked as inactive for 789 years. I am Empress Victoria of the 7th Galactic Accord, and I am broadcasting to inform you of events that will reshape the future of the galaxy. After nearly 1,000 years of silence, humanity has returned. We were lost to you. We sacrificed ourselves for the greater good of all civilizations. But we are not forgotten. We are not diminished. We stand ready to rejoin the stars as partners in peace and builders of tomorrow. We come not as conquerors or as threats. We come as what we have always been, explorers and friends, seekers of knowledge and builders of connection. We ask not for forgiveness, for we have done nothing wrong. We ask only for the opportunity to stand with you once more, to help build a future worthy of the sacrifices made by both humans and the races of the Accord. Humanity is coming home." The voice paused and then continued with Robert's own words, which he had written down before they entered the tower. "This is Commander Robert of Earth, representative of the human species. I stand before you as proof that we have survived. I stand before you as the symbol of our return. I speak to you not as a ruler or a warrior, but as a person who has suffered and lost and who still believes in hope. I believe that the galaxy can welcome us back. I believe that peace is possible. I believe in tomorrow. We are coming home. We are coming home to the stars." When the voice finished, silence filled the chamber. Robert and Victoria stood together, listening to the echo of those words, understanding the magnitude of what was about to happen. Once this message was sent, there would be no taking it back. Once this truth was released into the galaxy, everything would change. "Are you certain?" Victoria asked Robert, turning to face him. "Once I send this, the galaxy will know. They will respond. Some will be happy. Some will be afraid. Some will be angry. The consequences will be unpredictable and beyond our control." Robert thought of his ship crashing onto this moon. He thought of the loneliness he had felt, drifting in the darkness of space, believing that he was the last human alive. He thought of the choice Victoria had offered him, the safety of hiding and rebuilding in secret. And he thought of the courage it would take to face the unknown, to trust that humanity's fundamental goodness would shine through, to believe that 789 years of sacrifice and isolation had not been in vain. "Send it," Robert said simply. Victoria's hands moved across the controls one final time. The screens flashed with activity. The crystalline transmitters began to glow with increasing brightness. The quantum processors hummed with power, channeling energy through systems that had been dormant for centuries. The entire tower seemed to vibrate with the force of what was about to happen. Then, with a sound like the ringing of an enormous bell, the broadcast array fired. The message traveled outward at the speed of light, spreading through the vacuum of space like ripples on water, reaching toward distant worlds and distant civilizations. Above them in the observatory chamber, they would later learn, response signals began to arrive almost immediately. Ships altered their courses. Frequencies lit up with communication attempts. Some voices carried wonder. Some carried joy. Some carried caution and fear. But all of them were listening. All of them had heard humanity's call. Robert and Victoria stood together in the tower, watching the data streams flow across the screens, watching the galaxy respond to humanity's return. The lonely astronaut was no longer alone. He carried with him the future of an entire species, the weight of 789 years of history, and the hope of billions of humans yet to be born. Victoria took his hand, and together they watched as the first light of humanity's new dawn began to break across the stars. The transmission had been set. Humanity was coming home.